Growing older in this industry has been interesting, seeing all the changes, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's been bad. So I was thinking about this today when I was doing some video stuff or what. Getting older, and I started thinking about, because I started thinking of all the stupid things young guys are doing. And then I realized when I was a young guy, all the old guys were looking at all the stupid things that old guys are doing. And then one of these days, these young guys are going to be looking at the young guys, looking at all the stupid things that these guys are doing. The one thing that really bothered me, though, about getting older in this industry is the age average. I'm actually still one of the young ones. The age average right now is 56, 58, and that's a problem. So typically in this business, I know what you're thinking. The average age, there's all sorts of young people out here doing this. There are, but they're not staying. So when you get into your 30s and 40s, there's this huge gap of no one. And the guys that are getting in their 30s or 40s, they're basically just filling time because they've already been home, they've already been, and most of them, they typically stay just long enough to get a few things going, and they're out. So growing old in this industry is a dying thing, but it doesn't have to be. Now y'all are probably wondering what I'm doing with the liquor in my kitchen. I'm going to be doing ribs on Saturday, and we're going to make barbecue sauce. A buddy of mine wanted me to make another baklava video because basically he said it was 20 minutes of watching me drink. He said you could just kind of watch me go down. Maybe. Ooh, I keep mixing them like that. It's going to happen. Put that down. So we're going to start. You need a wooden spoon. Need you a pan. And I'm going to show you how to make the best sweet barbecue sauce with no vinegar or molasses. 5 ingredients. But we'll be talking about trucking. So you need garlic powder, some ground cumin, minced onions, ketchup, and brown sugar. And the secret ingredients, sriracha sauce. I actually used to make this commercially before I was, in between truck driving jobs. And I signed a non-disclosure, but that has expired. And then the guy who ended up buying the company and forcing the poor guy who owned it out, that dude got screwed. That's what happens when you don't get your own lawyer. He changed the recipe all up and made it this cheap monstrosity. But 5 ingredients. And we're going to make some real good stuff. So basically, I used to make this in about a 40-gallon pot. And basically, I'd make it with 8 gallons of... it's a 30-gallon pot. I'd make it with 8 gallons of ketchup, 25 pounds of brown sugar, and a pitcher full of minced onions, a cup of garlic, cup of cumin, and there was 3 bottles of this. But I ended up trimming it all down for personal use. So basically, we're going to use that 32-ounce thing of ketchup, 1 pound of brown sugar. We're going to use about 1 ounce of this, a tablespoon of this, a tablespoon of the garlic powder, and we're going to use 8 ounces, 4 ounces of this. That ought to be good. Now, I'll be the first one to tell you that everybody wants to sit there and blame all of what's going on in trucking on deregulation. It didn't help. I'm not going to lie, it didn't help. But what ended up happening was You can blame it on both political parties, but also you can blame it on lobbyists. These big companies got what they wanted. So, but I'm not here to talk politics. I'm here to make barbecue sauce. So we're going to put this in. So what we've been seeing going on is the culmination of no mentorship on any level. What ended up happening was, you say there's no mentorship and support on the truck driving level. Well, there was no mentorship or support on the owner level, on the management level. They just started hiring kids with degrees who didn't understand these little dots on the computer were people. So they took the humanity out of it and they tried to streamline it. I saw this a while back when I used to pour concrete. Years ago when I poured concrete, these big companies decided that they were going to try to streamline the concrete business, pour foundations and all that. So they started cutting corners. Basically, have a 2-pound bag, we're just going to dump half of it in. It looks like a lot, but it'll go away. Or it'll, trust me, let's catch it. It'll mix. But if you ever watched an old master who's been doing it for 40 or 50 years, concrete is an art. There's an art to pouring curbs, there's an art to pouring basement, there's a procedure and a process that you have to follow, just like with anything. But what ended up happening was they hired all of these cheap people, tried to streamline it, tried to force the issue, and that right there is why I'll never buy a house that's younger than 25, 30 years old. Because I'm looking at houses that I poured the concrete of that are, good grief, they'd be maybe 15 years old now, and the basements are cracking. The walls are caving in, they're collapsing. It's not that we sold them bad concrete. It's that the people that were hired to do it tried to cut corners, streamline it, and took the art out of it. And that's what they did to trucking. Driving is an art. It's a skilled discipline. And they've tried to streamline it. Well, this is what you get. I've been doing these videos about times gone by and whatnot, and I'm sitting here reaching into the past quite a bit, and you sit there and you just kind of wonder how we got where we are. And but when you really think about it and you look, it's really not that hard to figure out. We got where we're at because of exactly what I was talking about. Too many people trying to too many people sitting there trying to streamline it for profit. Here's the thing. I talk about profit a lot. I'm not against profit. But when you have a turnover rate, when did this expire? June 27, 2019. I might have some new stuff. When you try to do things strictly for profit and you take the humanity out of it, that's what we're getting. So growing older has been interesting. So apparently I've run into a snag. This expired in 2019. This expired in 17. I really should clean things out. This expired in 15. I don't even know why this is still here. Kroger didn't even make this brand anymore. And this doesn't have an expiration date even on it. So I'm going to have to figure out something here. But you need garlic powder. And don't use salt, use powder. So growing older, like I said, I've seen a lot of changes. And I've talked about being on the end of something neat. You know, I kind of watched cell phones come in. I saw the death of the CB radio. I saw the end of the 76. Good grief, the Burns brothers, Rip Griffins. I saw the end of quite a few things. But that doesn't mean that was a bad thing. I've seen the beginning of a lot of interesting things too. You know, E-log hasn't been that bad of a thing. I think it's been a lot of understood. Now, don't get me wrong. It's a pain in a lot of different ways. But for the most of us that were doing it, there was two kinds of employers out there. Some that let you do it and some that made you do it. And if it was up to us and they let us do it, that's one thing. When you're being forced to do it, that's something else. And that's something that E-log kind of stopped. But it created some other problems. Okay, so yeah, we got it all mixed up. Now, don't get me wrong, it looks a bit oriental, but it looks like a chili sauce that you'd get on like some kind of Asian dish. I hate saying Asian because Asia is a huge country, and Middle Eastern food is Asian, and so is Indian. So this is where political correctness loses me. But it looks pretty good. So what you have to do here is turn it on my very old Crosley stove. We'll turn it on here because, well, you need to get it warm, but you want it to boil, but it has to boil very slow. Due to the fact it has all the sugar in it, you have to boil it slow, very slow. You have to just bring the temperature up gradually. This will take a half hour, 45 minutes. But we got the jars done. So we get these all washed out. They got the lids on them and all that. Make sure you rinse them out good. Don't use harsh soap because you don't want soap in your barbecue sauce. In case you're wondering why I'm making this, I got a pack of, these are country style boneless beef ribs, and I'm gonna make them in the crock pot. But back to trucking. Yeah. So when I talk about mentorship, like I said, goes a long ways beyond the drivers. And the drivers pretty much are an afterthought. All these big companies, they don't have open door policies anymore. They're just, you're just an anonymous. You talk to your dispatcher from time to time. You know, there are guys out there that are just happy, never talking to anybody. Got to start stirring it. There are guys out there that are just happy, never talking to anybody. And, ooh, that's going to be good. And there's guys out there that sometimes just need you to hold their hand a little bit. And the training programs have really failed. And that's one thing, you know, back when I started driving, you had driving schools. But the majority of the guys learned on the job, and they basically were thrown to the wolves. But here's something happened to the work ethic. Everybody wants to be paid, but nobody wants to do anything. Now, don't get me wrong. When I was company driver, I was doing exactly what they wanted me to do. I was going where they wanted me to go. I went everywhere. Never really turned down any load. Didn't have a choice. But when I became an owner-operator, I thought, well, I'm going to become an owner-operator because, well, I'm going to be able to pick and choose what I do. Well, I was wrong. I do get to pick and choose what I do, but it didn't happen overnight. And I'll tell you this, I'm working harder now than I ever did. That's my grandma's stove, and much like my grandmother, it moves very slowly. Well, not anymore. My grandma's dead. The stove still works. My grandma was 4'9". She'd stand at this stove and I don't know how she used a stew pot, She'd just sit there and chuck things into that pot like Michael Jordan sinking a three-pointer. And somehow it all worked out. I mean, it was always fun to watch Granny cook. But what ended up happening, and what I'm getting to, and I started seeing this happen about 2002, 2003, and like I've talked about, U.S. Express kind of started it with the auto shift. Now, I'll be the first one to tell you, as a company driver, I don't have a problem with it automatic at all. They do everything you want it to do. I do think people need to know how to drive sticks. Because you may not have one at your next job. But automatic transmissions are worlds better, worlds better than they were when I started with the auto shift. But what U.S. Express realized was if they didn't have to spend all that time teaching a guy how to shift and treat it more like he's driving a car, red flag number 1 and 9 and 13, they could get the guy out hauling freight faster. So they started doing that. Well, a friend of mine, she went to work for a company out of Chattanooga that claims to be a Christian company. They have a covenant with their drivers. Let's say it that way. And she told me their training procedure, you had to have so many hours. Well, they crammed every hour they could. I mean, these guys were in school like 12, 14, 18 hours, just cram. And they get their permit, they get their book learning, and within a week and a half, they were hauling freight with a trainer. So what it ended up being was these companies realized if they cut corners, they could really start building their fleet faster. But this was a problem. As anyone knows, that if you're out hauling freight, and you're building your fleet, your accident rate goes up. Your turnover goes up. These companies started getting so big that they were more interested in recruiting rather than retention. My last company had this dream of being a 1,000 truck fleet. When I joined them, they had 425 trucks. And 125 of those drivers were million plus. Some of them were 2 and 3 million drivers, which meant this is a place where people go. When you've got, 35 to 40% of your drivers that have been here for 10 plus years, that's where you want to be. That's a good place to work. And they started pushing it. Well, what I ended up seeing over time was these old timers being told that you just need to drive the truck. Let us worry about this. And the old timers are like, look, this is happening. I can help you fix this. Nope, we don't need you. And next thing you know, they have a, quite literally, my last job, I think I saw the turnover rate as high as almost 200%. Now, I know what you're saying. 200%, that's impossible. It's not. They wouldn't have any trucks. Well, let me tell you how that happened. And all the big companies are doing this right now. You have a 600 truck fleet. You're hiring 50 to 60 guys a week. 50 weeks a year. Do the math. I'll wait. That's a lot of people. So I was talking to the recruiter, and I've talked about this before. He said, they made 40,000 contacts. The last year I worked there, he said they made 40,000 contacts. They got 2,200 of them in to the, they actually got 2,200 of them to come in for orientation. They hired 1,000 of them for a 600 truck fleet. So basically what was happening is you were having to hire 3 guys for one truck because one guy will stay and the other 2 guys are gone. That's what was happening. They just weren't keeping trucks. And so, or they weren't keeping drivers because they weren't working on retention. Now I'm going to stop you right here. Y'all are probably thinking, oh, if they would have just paid them more money, it would have been different. It comes a point where money is not the issue. They were throwing money at these guys. We're talking all sorts of recruiting bonuses, all sorts of sign-on bonuses. We're talking thousands of dollars. In fact, they were hiring these guys. I'd been there at the time when I quit, or actually when I became a owner-operator. I was making 46 cents a mile, and that took me 7 years to get there. They were hiring guys in at 44 and 45 right out of school. That really hacked a lot of people off. Now they're hiring guys in at 50 to 60 cents a mile. I got a buddy of mine that still works over there, 75 cents a mile. And it's a company driver. It's absolutely nuts. And the only reason he hasn't quit is because he's really close to retirement. It comes to that age again. He doesn't want to start all over. Sitting down here, it's starting to get warm. We're going to turn this up just a little bit. And you just got to keep stirring it. Now, if the amount of brown sugar bothers you, you actually can make that with Splenda, believe it or not. I've done it. The color is a lot brighter red because of the ketchup. It's not going to darken up like it does with the brown sugar. So you can make it, but it'll be brighter red, but it'll still taste just the same. So, like I said, a lot of the guys that that have had enough, they haven't quit because they're that close to retirement. And it's kind of sad because a buddy of mine, he's been doing this 35, 40 years. He's got millions of miles under his belt. He's got more miles than me. I've got, oh, good grief. And we figured it out, 4.5 million mediocre and mildly unsafe miles under my belt. I'm not a million mile safe driver, let's just put it that way. But I've got about 4.5, somewhere in there. And he's got, what, 5, 6 easy. And he was training for a while, and like I was, and he was to the point where he was just done too. He's like, why am I here? You know, one of the problems I had was that I've seen, and it's not this way with my company because, well, I'll explain it here in a minute. A lot of times when owners get ready to pass the torch on to their kids, because that's what you want to do with a family business. You want to leave it better than you found it and pass it on to someone who's going to do good with it and leave it better than they found it. And you got 3, 4 generations where I'm working now, and the guy getting ready to take over, the boy, he's doing good. And but that's not how I've seen it. You know, oh, here we go. You want to start stirring it. It's starting to bubble just a little bit. Because you want to get it all around hot, and you got to keep stirring it. But you know what's sad is you get a lot of these companies, like that's what happened to Bud Meyer. He went on vacation and his kid sold the company. The kid took the money and run. Jim Palmer's son tried to do that to him too. It just, so there's no Bible proverb in Ecclesiastes about leaving things to people that are undeserving when you die. These people were completely undeserving. They didn't appreciate the gift they were given of this company, of the livelihood. They just knew what it would bring them. My last company, you could kind of see that happening with the owner's son. And I remember watching him walk out, you know. Dude's never swept a floor in his life there. Never started hauling trailers, never started shagging, never. And don't get me wrong, that's his business. That's going to be good. And, you know, but he started running it, and he immediately drove it into the ground, and his dad had to come back out of retirement and fix it. Seen that happen several times. But I mean, right off the bat, he's got a company car, which is a Mercedes, a private garage, and he's you know, wearing $300 shoes with a $200 haircut and $1,000 worth of clothes. And here's the thing: I don't care. My paychecks aren't bouncing. I don't care about any of that. But the problem was he had no idea what he was doing. He just liked the prestige of being the owner, or what would pass for it. Didn't understand what he was doing. He didn't care. He figured he had enough money to let people run it, and got himself in some trouble. And we've seen this happen at several other places too. It's nothing new. But seems like he figured a few things out, thankfully. But turn this down just a little bit. Like I said, I don't care what happens as long as they're not screwing with my money. Started screwing with my money. I need this. So yeah, when you start screwing with my money, I get a little irritable. But that's one thing I've seen, is that the old guard is retiring and is passing on. And a lot of guys have tried, I think, but you know, you want, every parent wants the kid to live better than they did. That's 100% understandable. So they build up something beautiful and leave it to the kid, and the kid doesn't appreciate it. Never had to put any sweat equity into it. So then you end up having a problem. And that's one of the things I've seen as I've gotten older. I know it's always been this way, but it's been, with the changes in attitude and the way people are acting, it's been kind of, that goes on top of the fridge. It's been happening more and more lately, you know. You know, everybody's just taking the money and running. So, yeah, there we go. Let me finish this up. I'm going to put it in the, I'm going to use a measuring cup to scoop it because it's got that. We're going to fill up these jars, and we're going to let them cool on the counter, and they will seal themselves. Part of the secret to cooking this is you want it to bubble, but you don't want it to boil. When it starts bubbling, that means it's done. And you just keep stirring it to where it'll bubble while you're boiling it, or while you're stirring it. Once you start getting those first few bubbles, she's done. And then you put them in the jars. So let's see. Yep, see, it's steaming. We'll get a bubble here in a minute. Oh, there's a couple starting to come up. Yep, there's one right there. So, yep, she's done. So we got 2 of them made with a little bit left over. I'll figure out to do something with. So where does this leave me in trucking? How is this? You know, I'm making barbecues, talking about getting older in the truck driving game, and I really haven't talked a whole lot about getting older. If there's one thing I've learned in all of this, is that truck driving is one of the most fluid jobs you'll ever have. And I mean fluid. Things are changing constantly. And we are having to adapt to the change, and some guys adapt pretty well and some guys don't. I guess I've been forced to adapt in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of things I did embrace. But what I'm seeing, I hate talking about deregulation, but let me go find someplace more comfortable to sit. Truthfully, I'm sick and tired of hearing a lot of people talking about trucker pride and all that. Peer pressure used to be a good thing in trucking. It kept us all straight. We relied on each other to get the job done because we needed each other. We need each other now more than ever. But what I've seen is everybody screaming, mind your own business, mind your own business. And I'm like, your business is my business. Because when you, like I've said before, when you burn the locals, you affect me. Because I have to deal with those guys too. We're all dealing with the same people, guys. And when you ran the mentorship and the professionalism out of it, like they ran it out of the concrete industry, this is what you're left with. You're left with a bunch of crappy people who pee and crap all over truck stops, park on the fuel islands to take their breaks, dump their stuff everywhere, throw their trash everywhere. And there's no respect. These guys are sitting here. These are the guys that are running 35 and 40 mile an hour through the truck stops. You want professionalism. Professionalism has to start with you. But nobody's being held accountable. And I think that accountability is what I've seen go out of the industry in the last few years. I can't tell you how many talented drivers I fired. Because talent only, I've said before, talent only takes you so far. The rest is skill. And skill is a perishable commodity that has to be continually sharpened. And so many people get talent and skill mixed up. Your talent gets you to the door, the skill gets you through the house. And my job was to develop talent into skill. And when you can't do that, when nobody will listen, if somebody's completely untrainable, there's nothing you can do. You have to fire them. You have to let them go. And it breaks my heart because I saw I had to let so much talent go. And that's one of the things, as this industry's grown, and what I've seen growing old in it, is the amount of talent that's completely wasted. You know, with a lot of these young kids who come in and they're really good, but they get driven out of the industry because they were at the wrong company. Or a lot of these talented kids who I've had to fire because they were completely untrainable. The old days are gone. Let's just get that out. The old days are never coming back. I know what we would like. And 44 years after deregulation, 45 years, this is the result of it. I'm not saying that the union was a great thing. But when you look back on it, I would almost rather have that than, I would almost rather have it be Teamsters and unionized like it was than what I'm dealing with now. You know, that's for a completely different, video, but we're all in this together. And what I've seen growing older is I see these young guys come in and I see them come and go. But even office staff, I see great office staff. They come and go. You have to stay fluid. A lot of these business owners, they stay in it too long. And they end up wrecking their business because they're not willing to embrace new things. Now, I'm not saying all new things need to be embraced. But you got to have an open enough mind to understand what you're looking at. Because I'll tell you this, if you're not willing to at least explore the opportunity, you're already done. And what I've seen growing up in the business was a lot of these old businesses that were really good back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. They're not around anymore because the owners would not embrace the future. We've been doing it this way for 30 years. We're not changing. You probably should. But it's not my business. That's not my business. So it's been a real mixed bag over the last, almost 24 years now. And I'm to the age now to where I'm not going to be doing anything else. But at the end of the day, I'm doing all right, and it's taken me a long time to get here. And I want you young guys to understand that it takes time. You're going to make money, but you have to go through the suck. You have to be willing to put in your time. So, put in your time, learn a few things, and I'll guarantee you, if you play your cards right and you do what you need to do legally, you're going to be all right. But it takes time. So, and time is one of the things that we don't have a whole lot of. And like I said, I've seen a lot of things come and go. And I know, like my buddy who's been doing this since 77, he's getting ready to retire. He's 69, 70 now. And he finally sold his truck, or he's selling his truck, and he's a company driver, and he's slowing down. And that boy's got some stories, and he's seen some changes. But he's like me. He just understands it is what it is, and that's how these things work. So I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for watching. And the barbecue sauce is going to be good. We'll see you next video.